Okay.
Okay, so from there on, I was working 1 year for Sun Area Network, and from there on, the rest of the experience is completely into the cloud migration.
Got it. Any
Uh,
specific cloud?
so it's something like this. It's not specific to one vendor. It's both public and private. I have
Got it.
exposure in migration for AWS, IBM Cloud, and right now it's with private cloud Ericsson.
Okay. Perfect, Revant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Praveen, so we'll go next. Okay. All right. Without any further ado, we'll get started. So, quick introduction about me, myself, Mahi Trainer. Training is my it's been part of a journey since more than 11 years. I have a total of 12 and a half, 13 years experience, and I've been training since 11 years. So it's been part of my pretty much daily routine. I used to train on storage and backup technologies, and then I got into cloud. So this is all part of the journey, right? When I started off, initially I was into storage primarily, and then I, stretched my footprint into every part of the data center, including virtualization, physical servers, Linux, Windows, networking, doing migrations on-prem. And then I stretched into backups. I used to manage TSM primarily, but then also got into net backup and backup exec a little bit. And then I got into other, the latest backup vendors, right? If you want to call them like a copy data management vendors, like Cohesity, Actifio. So those are the other backup vendors I got into, and I manage those. More like a technical consultant, solutions architect, also handling L3 issues in those fronts. From a storage perspective, I got into NetApp, I got into EMC, kind of both of them. And then with respect to cloud, AWS is, what I picked up since the last 4 years. And as a solutions architect, you have to blend each of these technologies per the requirement and the business need of the customer or the organization, you reflect. So with that, right, I really had this opportunity to work on all these broad aspects. With respect to AWS in particular, I started working since 4 years, and I started training since almost 3 years now. So this particular course is mostly geared towards infrastructure, admins, engineers, architects, if you want to say, because the way we are approaching this course is a little different and unique, plus a little bonus on top of what AWS officially is offering, right? Like if you go to the AWS website, there are different set of certification paths that they provide you. There are two major certification paths, right? One is towards the completely development, and other is more towards administration, infrastructure as a service, automation, right? That front, and that's the front that we are going to cover in this particular course. So although some of you might already be into AWS or may have worked on AWS, in this particular course, we are going to assume that you are new to AWS, you are new to cloud, right? In fact, we are going to teach some basics of networking just to ensure that everyone of us are on the same page, because networking is a core part and integral part of course, any data center, especially cloud. Also, we will start with very basics of Linux, and then slowly get on to the introduction to cloud, and then get specific to AWS. Also, more from architect standpoint, there is a solutions architect course from AWS officially, so we will be covering pretty much everything in the topic, plus sysops as well, sysops admin as well. So we are blending both administration day-to-day activities, plus the whole solutions architect kind of approach, and having to know all the services in AWS and working on it, getting that hands-on, And then we will move into the automation part, right? How can we repeatedly make these steps more efficient with Python SDK and Terraform? How do you do Python scripting? How do you use Terraform to really have that infrastructure as a code management in AWS? I'm sure you guys heard of, Cloud Formation. It's an orchestration tool within AWS, but the limitation is it can only do automation with AWS. Let's say you want to blend automating, maybe migrating your VMs from on-premise in a VMware environment to a cloud, right? Cloud Formation cannot do it. Terraform can do it. And when you combine the power of Terraform with Python, that's when you can really automate. So even that is being covered. And at the end, we will also be covering the whole database migration, VM migration, data migration concepts, AWS Cloud Migration Hub. Some of those tools will also be covered, right? Again, I'm going to go a little more deeper into the course curriculum, but I'm just giving you a brief of what you can expect out of this. Okay. So before I quickly talk about the next, let me share my screen. I will walk you through a quick presentation. Now, do let me know if you feel that, hey, this is a lot of redundant things that we have already heard, and if everyone agrees, I am okay to just skip through it. But yeah, let me know. I'm going to share my screen here. So we've all been very kind of hearing about this buzzword called cloud computing, right? In general, what does cloud computing mean? Again, it's at the end of the day basically the same hardware such as server, storage, network, the same software which is your hypervisor, your operating system, or your applications. It's the same set of hardware and software, but instead of building your own data center that is owned or managed by your organization or your company, it is someone else who is setting it up for you, which can be a Amazon, which can be a Microsoft, and then you consume those resources, those servers, software, etc., as a service, right? That's all what cloud computing is. It's basically having the compute in a cloud, and a cloud is not an imaginary world. It's very much a data center. But since the company or the organization is not managing or owning it, it's managed by someone else called as a cloud service provider, one of which is AWS, right? So for us, what it means is all you need is a computer or some kind of a client which can connect to those services, which can connect to those servers which are present with AWS to be able to connect and manage, right? So that's what cloud computing means. Now coming to the need for cloud computing, let me make this a little bigger. Coming to the need for cloud computing, before we get into that, let's understand what are the challenges that we are facing with an on-premise data center. Typically, one of the most important aspect is to be able to manage the on-premise data center, right? Because you need enough environmental factors such as real estate, right? You need to have proper cooling, you need to have power redundancy, you need to have people who can move things around, you need that extra resources to be able to manage those resources, all of that. So it comes with that additional capital cost which you have to spend upfront. Forget about the operating cost that will anyways come, right? On the first hand, you have to spend money on the capital cost, so there's a lot of investment that you have to do upfront. And of course, to be able to manage, you need resources. So you need Linux admins, you need Windows admins, you need different administrators for different software, hardware management, OS management, to be able to cater to it. On top of that, you also have the regular incurring operating cost, because every time there is a hardware failure, or you need support from a vendor, you have to buy their support premium, you have to buy the license for the OS cost. So there is a monthly premium or a yearly premium also that is associated with this. Plus, once you buy or once you invest on these hardware or software, it's a dead investment, right? It's like once you buy it, you either use it or you burn it. You cannot really return it back, right? Once you bought it, it's with you. Whether you use it or don't, it's up to you, but you have already paid for it. So these are the typical challenges that we see with an on-premise data center. And this is exactly what cloud is supposed to overcome and handle. For example, software updates, right? So once you go to cloud, because you have these, again, we call them as virtual servers, right? In the cloud, when you have these virtual servers that you have leased from the AWS service provider, it is not so much our responsibility to ensure that there is high availability. For example, your server is sitting, your virtual server is sitting on some kind of a physical server, right? If the physical server goes down, it is not our responsibility to kind of ensure and move that virtual server and there is no data loss and moving it to another physical server. It is not our responsibility. It is the cloud service provider's responsibility. He will need to set up some softwares. He will need to set up some kind of a governance where if one physical server goes down, all the virtual servers running on it are automatically moved to another physical server. He will completely manage it. Even if there are any software updates, more from a security standpoint, or there are any bug fixes, etc., from a backend operating system perspective or backend hypervisor perspective or hardware perspective, BIOS firmware upgrades, anything, is completely handled by the cloud service provider and it is managed by him. It helps control costs because with cloud, there is no capital investment that you have to really put upfront. Okay. It is more like a pay-per-use model. For example, if you need 10 virtual servers with certain configuration and you only need it for 1 week, maybe you are testing something, and for that testing you need 10 servers only for 7 days. Fine, go to AWS, request for the servers, use it for 7 days, and at the end of 7th day you shut them down or you terminate them. Once you do that, the VMs are gone and you're not paying for the servers anymore, right? So it is a pay-per-use model, which means you're not spending that capital cost that you would have to spend if it was on-premise, like on the power equipment, on the cooling, on the real estate, hardware, buying the hardware, nothing. You're not owning it, right? It is secure. Now there is this misnomer that hey, anything in cloud is insecure, or it is more prone for the data to be hacked, or DDoS attack, man in the middle attack, all those security vulnerabilities, right? But that's not really the case, because that can happen anywhere. It can happen even for on-prem. Haven't we heard of so many instances for data breaches in an on-premise data center? We did, right? So it's a misnomer that cloud is not secure, because, like, for example, AWS is giving you so many tools. They have built so many tools that they are giving to the customers for them to secure their environment in the cloud, like their servers in the cloud. AWS is giving you the tools. Now, do you have the right expertise within your organization who knows how to manage those tools, or who understands how to use those tools and make your environment secure? Is up to you. So it completely depends upon you, and AWS calls it as a shared responsibility model, which means there is certain part of the infrastructure that AWS will secure for you, but the other half is your responsibility. You have to ensure you keep your data secure using the tools provided by AWS. So that's how it works. It's a shared responsibility model. Flexible resources can be increased or decreased. Like I said, you wanted 10 servers for 7 days, and when you're in the third day, you suddenly realize that hey, I need 10 more servers. Looks like the one that I have is not enough to finish my job. So fine, just spin more servers. Of course, you have to pay for 20 servers now, but that's fine. You got what you need, right? And let's say on the end of 50th day, you realize that, oh, I initially planned for 7 days, but you know what? I could finish this in 5 days. Fine. Once you are done on the 5th day, just terminate all the 20 servers, right? So it's not only scaling up, it's also scaling down, and it's very flexible in that aspect. It helps provide stability because all of this is managed by AWS, and there are set SLAs, there are set availability, ratios that cloud service provider puts out, right? They say, hey, if you want a server to be having an uptime of 99.99%, if that's your requirement because it's a super critical application for you, fine. They have the certain approach that, for example, build multiple servers, right? Try to create multiple servers for your application and set up some load balancer in front of it, so that even if one data center in AWS go down, you still have your load balancer pointing to the other data center, another server running the same application, so your application is not down. So Amazon is giving you everything. They're giving you the right tools, the right approach, all the needed hardware, software, everything. Now it is your responsibility to figure out whether what meets my requirement and how I need to architect the setup, right? Any questions so far with respect to cloud computing benefits? What do you think? Maybe there are other benefits of on-prem that you might think of. Any comments?
Hey,
Hi,
Habib here.
Shiva here.
Yep, Shiva, go ahead.
The billing will be based on per day, or on what basis the billing will be done for the cloud computing resources?
So there are different costing models that are available. It also depends on the service. For example, if you look at EC2 instance, which is EC2 service, which is the virtual machine service in AWS, they charge you by the hour. How many hours you run your servers, based on that, depending on the configuration, there is a per hour cost. Now, for that server, you need, right, which is called as elastic block storage. So that service for EBS, there is another kind of cost. It is per month cost. So it varies by component to component. But the way you pay money is usually a monthly. So the billing cycle, right? Let's say for the entire 30 days, you have consumed X number of servers, 10 terabytes of storage, whatever network, etc. You actually are supposed to pay at the end of the month. So the billing cycle is every month.
Okay, got it.
Maybe one question from my side, Mahit, Revant here. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so now that we will have some critical applications which will only be running on the physical servers. Okay, let's talk. I have 10 physical servers which have some extended licenses for a couple of years more. So in that cases, if I'm moving to the cloud, whatever the existing licenses I have purchased, so how do we tackle in those cases?
So for example, let's take Oracle, right? So Oracle is usually a CPU based licensing, which means you have already procured them. Now, when you're moving to cloud, you have two offerings. One, you can stick to the same kind of a setup, meaning you can, instead of, you can basically build the same physical server configuration in the cloud and then import your licenses as is with Oracle, right? Or the second option is, the preferred option, the second option is to be able to use an existing service called RDS, which is a relational database service, which is a SaaS or a PaaS service in the cloud, which already has the Oracle database setup. But because you already bought the licenses for it, I would recommend you go for the first approach.
Okay. So lift and shift approach doesn't work out here then, since it is completely owned by the other vendor.
Not in every scenario, right? For example, you may have already bought the Windows OS license, right? So when you already bought that, you can use that in the cloud. For example, you can build your own AMIs, custom AMIs, and then use that to build your Windows servers in the cloud. And a lot of customers do that, right? Because they've already invested on all these licensing on-prem, and suddenly they want to move, they will lose that 2-3 years free license that they have bought. So AWS does provide the flexibility to bring your own license.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? All right.
Yeah, Habib here. Yeah.
Go ahead.
As you said that it will be yes. So if I have a server using for 7 days, for example, I'm saying, so for the 8th day, I just want to decommit. So shall I have to pay for the entire month?
No, not for the servers, because the server billing is a per hour billing. If
Okay.
you go with that, whenever you shut it down, starting from the time you spin it up until the time you shut it down, the number of hours are calculated, and per hour into the cost is what you have to pay for.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. But although there are certain, within EC2, right, within EC2 virtual machine service in the cloud in AWS, there are different costing models available. There is something called as reserved instance, which means you are basically going in an agreement with AWS and saying, hey, I am going to assure you that I'm going to run these 10 servers at least for 1 year. I'm going to assure you, which means AWS is also getting benefited, right? Because they are getting assured that, hey, these 10 servers are going to run for 1 year at least. So what AWS will do in turn is they will try to give the reduced cost. So there will be almost up to 67% saving that AWS will give to the customer because they are coming in agreement. So if you come in an agreement and if you go for 1 year, and now you say, hey, I only will use for 7 days, your agreement is already done, right? Then you can't go back.
Yeah,
So
got it.
there are such costing models also. But look at the benefit. You are saving up to 70% cost, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Perfect. With respect to cloud deployment models, I'm sure you guys have heard of all of these before, but I'll try to give a quick brief. Public cloud is, what we hear most of the time, and is the most popular cloud, wherein AWS is a public cloud, right? Which means any user like you and me, any organization, like the big giants, or any small medium enterprises, anyone, right, can go to AWS, set up their account, and then start using the resources. So the cloud provided by AWS is public because anyone can use, and we can all share resources. There is no restriction, right? Such type of a cloud is called a public cloud. Opposed to that, a private cloud is more restrictive. For example, you have your own data center somewhere in Delhi, let's say, and you have set up your own kind of some kind of an automation, some kind of a self-service portal which will auto create servers when you just fill in the form. So and then you have some kind of a API driven workflow where once you don't need the server, you again go into some form and then submit, I want the server to be terminated, it will be done. So you have some kind of a features that are present in cloud. You have brought them to the on-premise data center, and you have your own private cloud, right? Even that is possible. Or sometimes it is also, these vendors, right? They provide these islands of clouds, which is more like a restrictive to only your company or your organization, where no one else, no other customer or no other company will come use the same hardware that is presented to you, right? So it's exactly opposite to public cloud, which is private cloud. Now coming to the community or government cloud, so this is, think of it as, let's say there are certain government institutions, right? If I take example in the United States, you have these NIA, and you have the federal government and other institutes, right? Government institutes. Now, for them, it's like, hey, if we share our data in the same data center as the other companies and other, regular users like us, they have this small, feeling that, hey, our data could be compromised, right? Because of certain audit and compliance requirements, they are not allowed to do that. Even though it doesn't mean that the data can always be hacked, it's just that extra level of isolation that these government institutes want to have. So there are certain cloud environments, even AWS has them. They call it as AWS Gov Cloud, Gov Cloud, which are cloud data centers that are managed by AWS, but only the government institutes will have access to it. So, for example, if I want to create an account or manage the server in Gov Cloud, they will not authorize me. They will not even let me to go to that cloud. So any government institute, if they want to go set up their infrastructure in the Gov Cloud, they have to certify with AWS and say, hey, we are the government representative. This is our company. So please allow us. So only those government institutes are allowed to use that cloud. No one else. So that such kind of a restrictive cloud is only given to certain set of common use case or common institutes, right, is called as a community or a government cloud. When it comes to hybrid cloud, it is basically a mix of everything, right? It's a mix of both public and private, which also basically AWS falls in because, like, if you have a company who has an on-premise data center and they also have certain infrastructure in cloud, which means they have a private and they have a public cloud, right? So they have both together, and this is what you will actually see in reality. Okay, like pretty much every company has a mix of both. They will have some applications which are on premise and they would like to keep it that way, and some infrastructure that is in cloud. Of course, the push for all these institutes is always to see how they can push things to cloud, but for some reasons, like for example mainframes, right? There are certain applications that these finance banking institutes use which run on mainframes, and mainframe hardware support is not available in cloud yet, at least in AWS. Okay, which means for them to retain the application, the institute has to keep it on premise. So there are certain such kind of where on premise has to stay, although the large chunk or the large portion of it is moving to cloud. And that's how institutes think, right? They always want to start moving things to cloud, but then sometimes they might hit these roadblocks. They're like, okay, fine, when the time comes we will again move this to cloud, but for now let's keep it in the on-prem. So a hybrid cloud deployment model is what you will see pretty much everywhere now. Coming to the cloud services, again, I'm sure you heard of these different terminologies called IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So in a private cloud, basically, all the ones that are indicated in orange are the ones that are managed by the customer. So in a private cloud, everything is owned by the customer because it's his own data center, right? But when it comes to infrastructure as service model, in this, all the hardware such as network, storage, server, virtualization layer is something that is provided by the cloud vendor. For example, AWS EC2 service is a good example. And only the OS data and the application is what customer will bring. He will bring his own, Windows image or Linux image, his own data, his own applications, right? That falls under infrastructure as a service cloud model. Then you have platform as a service, wherein apart from the hardware, even the OS is provided by the cloud vendor. A good example is there is a service in Amazon called as RDS, which stands for Relational Database Service. It's a database service, right? Wherein you are able to use the database as a service and just consume it, right? So that fits in this particular model. Then you have software service, which is the entire software stack is managed by cloud. A good example is Google, right? For example, Gmail or Google Drive, Google Chat. So all these are software as service models because you are not having to manage anything, right? You are just consuming that service. You are just using that service. Everything is managed by Google. So these are so every service that you have across any cloud vendor, it should fall into one of these categories, either IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS. Of course, the cloud service provider market is growing really, really huge. if you look at either the cloud market, base, right, or even the YOY, which is a metric called as year-on-year growth for the top cloud providers such as Amazon, Azure, Google, Alibaba is now picking up. So all these cloud providers, if you look at their year-on-year growth, that is how much have they grown compared to the previous year. Similarly, that is whooping. I mean, it's more than 30-40% for all the cloud service providers. And of course, Amazon is the pioneer, is the leader in the whole range, because its market share is very, very huge than Azure, at least 1.5 to 2 times more than Azure. Azure is next, and then is Google Cloud Platform. One of the key differentiators that you will find with Amazon is it is first to market. That is, whenever there is a new technology, new skill that is getting popular in the IT arena, Amazon is the first person to introduce it in the cloud space, right? Either it be your machine learning, artificial intelligence, your virtual reality, augmented reality, or anything. I mean, every new thing that is coming in the IT market, Amazon is the first who would release a service on it, right? And they are not here just now. In fact, Amazon started off its services way back in 2003, when we weren't really into cloud because they had very limited services. But since I would say from 2014 to 2015, things have got really big, and there are at least 300 plus services that are present in Amazon today. There is a service for every need. You need a storage, there is a service. You need a file system, there is a service. You need network, there is a service. You need desktop, virtual desktop, there is a service. You need office, suites such as Word document, PowerPoint, there is a service. You need voice translation, there is a service. Image transformation, there. So everything that you are doing with different applications in your on-premise, everything is there. You need to send emails, replace Outlook, there is service. So there is service for everything. Okay. In fact, in terms of its global infrastructure, it is pretty plainly spread out across the globe. As you can see, they have their regions, is what we call them. Region in Amazon is a set of data centers grouped together. Like, for example, they have one region in Mumbai in India. So this is a little old screenshot. This show 2 here. The 2 number is indicating the number of data centers they have in that region. But right now it's 3. They have 3 data centers in Mumbai. In fact, in Hyderabad, they are building one more new region that might soon come up. And you can see they are also available in South America, North America. They have in Canada, Europe, Australia, Asia Pacific. They're pretty spread out across the world. Again, like I said, this is a little older screenshot, so you might see some of them missing here. There are at least 3 or 4 more regions available which are missing here, and the number of data centers may have also increased by 1 or 2 in their respective regions. All right, so I'm done from my side. I can quickly walk you through what we will be covering in the course here in a sec. One moment, guys. I'll walk you through the course contents. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So, like I said, we will start with basics of networking, where we will be discussing about what are IP classes, public IP, private IP, how does subnets work, what is gateway, how does the routing work, what are route tables. So all the basic networking which is needed for cloud. And then Linux administration, just introduction to Linux, how to set up Linux, how do you manage files, permissions in Linux, mounting file systems, some of the common commands. Same here, some of the common commands that we use for troubleshooting in networking. Same with Linux, we will be covering. And then we will get into the introduction to cloud computing with respect to AWS. discuss about all the IaaS, PaaS, SaaS in more detail, right? And then we will look at the overall infrastructure of AWS, how they are set up, how to choose which region, how is that determined, how do you set up the disaster recovery across 2 regions, like how is that whole availability thing set up, the whole details, and then the overview of the console, getting into the Amazon console, looking at things, getting familiarized. So you also have a CLI that Amazon provides where you can manage pretty much everything that you do through a interface. You can do it through CLI and SDKs. Although I will be covering the AWS CLI part, the SDK part will be covered by the other trainer with respect to Terraform and Python. EC2, this is the core service. This is the most popular service in Amazon. This is where you create these virtual servers. So we'll be looking at all the different ways of creating it, handling it, troubleshooting it, increasing the volumes, backup recoveries, all the different workflows corresponding to this. Then load balancer is also very key for any high availability application. So what are the different kinds of load balancers? How to set up a load balancer? We will be doing practicals around it, setting it up. Auto scaling. Also, this is a very cool feature which allows you to automatically grow the number of servers as on a need basis, or even shrink when you don't need it. Beanstalk is another very it's like a package of applications, right? It's like, hey, I need a web server, I need a PHP with WordPress, for example, to be able to set up a web server. Instead of you setting up a server and then installing PHP and then installing WordPress, you can put it into a package, or there are default packages already available which you can directly deploy with Beanstalk. S3 is another very interesting service. It's like a Google Drive, right? We use Google Drive a lot. So it's like S3 is like a Google Drive, but it has a lot more enterprise features beyond Google Drive. Replication, availability, peering, a lot of permission management, a lot of different details. Glacier is more like an archiving service, especially for who come from the backup background. We all understand how important the data archiving is for long term. So Glacier is a service that can help with that. EFS is kind of a NFS protocol service. Who are familiar with NAS technology, right? They understand the NFS protocol. So how important NFS protocol is to be able to share the data across multiple servers, multiple Linux servers to be specific. So all that and will be covered. CloudWatch is like the monitoring tool, alerting tool, reporting tool. It can do a lot of things. It can do data collection across servers, across pretty much any service in the cloud. It can also show you reports. You can create your own custom dashboards. It will also help you to do log analysis. Having a centralized log repository that comes from 1,000 different Linux servers into one log repository where the analysis becomes more simpler, more easier. It can do that. It can set up also alarms where if a certain server CPU utilization goes beyond 80%, you want to get an email alert. Fine, use CloudWatch. Systems Manager is, think of it as a configuration management tool. I'm sure some of you may have heard of, SaltStack or Chef, right? These configuration management tools, or BMC's Atrium Orchestrator, server automation tools. So some of these configuration management tools. So AWS System Manager is the configuration management tool for all your EC2 instances in AWS. It can do quite a few things. We will discuss that. And then simple notification service is just sending out emails, sending out mobile text notifications, push notifications through applications. As the name says, right, it's a notification service. CloudFront is your caching solution. Let's say you have your server sitting in the US, in the US AWS region, but you are growing your business and there are a lot of users in India who are trying to access the same web service. Obviously, going all the way from India to US, there's some latency, right? To overcome that, you can use a caching solution like CloudFront, which will make the web page load faster or the downloads happen much faster, even though the servers are in the US. Identity access management is another very important service. controls how you set up the role-based access, how do you set up users, authentication, passwords, connection, etc. to AWS. Route 53 is the DNS management service, similar to our Microsoft DNS server, right? But it provides a lot more features beyond that. There are different types of routing policies that you can set up in Route 53. VPC is like your virtual data center in the cloud, because AWS is a shared model. You know, thousands and if not millions of companies are using the same region, the same data center. So how do you logically isolate all these different resources between company to company? VPC is the answer. Then RDS, Aurora, and DynamoDB are the different databases. So like how you have MySQL, Oracle, or PostgreSQL databases in the on-premise. Similarly, how can you set that up in the cloud without having you to install the databases on a server, on a OS? How do you magically set it up on the cloud? These are the services that will help you. There are other services such as SQS, Cloud, which help with audit logging, with help with monitoring your resources, making sure you are following the compliant, you are binded by the security rules. All those details will be discussed there. Storage Gateway and KMS, again, these are other services in the cloud that help with extending your storage between on-premise and cloud. KMS is a encryption service that will help data to be encrypted at rest. And archiving and tiering solutions, we will discuss how the different backup tools help integrate with cloud to be able to do that archiving, do that backup, make use of cloud as the secondary copy instead of keeping it archiving those tapes, etc., with a third-party vendor like Iron Mountain, or having that secondary data center where you keep the second copy of the tape. Use cloud as your secondary data center, right? Yeah, so that's what will be covered with respect to AWS, administration and services. Now I will hand over the control to Mr. Parameswara, who will be talking you through the Python and cloud automation.
Yeah, thank you, Mahesh. Am I audible?
Sure. You are.
Yeah. Organizers, can you please give me the ability to share the screen?
Let me try that. Okay, you should have it. Parmesh, are you able to present? Okay.
No. Give me a minute. Oh, it's asking for restart.
Shall I present and you will walk them through, Parmesh, or do you have a certain set of slides?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you provide me again the screen share?
All right.
Able to see my screen, right?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, good. Okay. So yeah, here I am to tell you about the Terraform and Python, which are the automation tools used for cloud. So I would like to explain you what are the use cases of this Terraform and Python, and how I'll be driving this training session for understanding of these two modules. Okay, so as you know, like Python is a complete language. So you can I mean, it's a complete programming language. So you can tell the machine that what to do, like in an automation or any scripting way. Okay, so here coming to especially Python SDK. Okay, what Python SDK does in cloud. Okay, so when you are writing the automations, okay, so using Python SDK, every provider like Azure or Oracle or AWS is providing some SDK for Python. So where you need to install it and you can use it. Means it's nothing like they are giving some APIs. Consuming that APIs, you can run some automations on top of that. Okay. So what this exactly this Python SDK will do is it will be used for maintaining instances. Okay. So instances in the sense you can resources. Okay. Here exactly to say. So any resource like database or compute or storage, anything, if you want to shut down or restart or hibernate or start, so you can use this Python SDK and you can do this. So where exactly this uh, uh, use case is needed is, suppose you have a team and you want to suppose a member is exiting from your team, you want to shut down or terminate all the instances of what he is holding up with. Okay, then you can put an automation and hook it up to some tool, so that whenever our employee is getting exited, so this automation runs and it will check what are the instances tied to him, and it can terminate or it can shut down. So all these uh, particular actions can be done with using Python SDK. So at the same time, triggering the services. This is one of the important concept, because suppose you are buying a product in a e-commerce website. Okay, you get the OTP or you get an SMS alert that you have bought something. Okay, so like this, if any email, so all these services, how you can automate that. Okay, so by using again Python SDK, you can integrate your cloud services into your Python automation, and you can trigger all this on the fly. So that's particular one thing Python SDK does, and get the logs and usage. Okay, so as like Mahesh said, so there are a lot of CloudWatch logs. All these will be done by AWS and they will be kept in CloudWatch. Okay, so CloudWatch like this, if any logs are there, you can get the logs to your local and then they can run some analysis on top of that. Okay, so for all these we will be using Python SDK. I have mentioned very few here, but when you really see the Python SDK, you can find a lot more services that it is providing. Okay, so but you need to know how an automation will communicate, because if you are communicating with your console, you will have all your access, everything in place, so you can easily do using via web UI. But if it is an automation, again you need to give the privileges to that automation. So all this should come in place, and you need to build the entire automation tool to run your services. Okay, so that is one part where Python SDK does. So again, I have taken some screenshot of individual users who are providing the SDK. So AWS SDK, typically it is the Boto 3. Okay, where you will be installing the Boto 3 library to your Python, and then you will be importing that Boto 3 and you can run, you can initialize whatever the service you require, and then you can run your action part on top of that. So as like AWS, we have for Azure, for Oracle Cloud, for Google Cloud. So for each vendor, they have an SDK. You are supposed to install that particular SDK and you are supposed to use that. So that is where the SDKs from each cloud are. And coming to Terraform, so to differentiate Python, what it is doing is in your automation, it is doing some actions. Okay, so it runs along with your automation. So if it is an suppose like an e-commerce site or your maintenance site, it is triggering some action part on your cloud. Okay, but what Terraform does is it maintains the infrastructure. Suppose let's say again the same example, a new employee comes, you want to dedicate some resources to that employee. Okay, so he need not to go to the cloud and manually spin up some instances or resources for him. Okay, so Terraform does the part for you. So you can automate in your automation, you can link up Terraform so that Terraform will connect to the cloud. It will spin up some instances. Okay, so that is the part what Terraform does. Actually, each provider has their own automation as well in place. Like if you say CloudFormation in AWS, which can trigger. But why we are going for again Terraform is like a global thing. So it can support 45 plus providers. Of course, the same code you cannot reuse, but you should refactor the code for the provider to whom you are using it. Okay, so in that way we will be using the Terraform. Okay, so the another advantage of Terraform is it stores the state information. So whatever the instances you have pinned up, okay, so whatever the storage you have pinned up, so whatever the infrastructure you have pinned up, it stores the state information, so that if you want to increase the RAM, it already knows how much RAM you have. Okay, so it can based on that it can increase the RAM required. At the same time, optionally it installs the required software. So to make it easy to understand, if suppose we are taking some storage, okay, so if it is a on premises or local storage NAS if you are mounting, so what you do for authentication, okay, so you can go for some SSO or auth models to store the authentication information. But when it is a cloud, we generally prefer again Kerberos to give the authentication, because it can relog in a particular number of hours like that. So that is how you need to go for again Kerberos or such. If any installs are required, again very light installs that will taken care by the Terraform. Okay, if you are going with n number of agents or like that, so Ansible is the one which is widely used for that. Okay, but here Terraform you can install along with the infrastructure when you are spinning up the infrastructure. Okay, so that is what mainly Terraform uses for. Apart from infrastructure, if there is something you need to run across all the instances you are holding up, then you can use that use case for Terraform also. Like let's say if you are using a big data kind of thing, okay, so you want to run a query on all the instances, okay, and get some information, okay, then you can put up a Terraform snippet associated to it, then you can run across all your instances. So something if you want to run across all your instances, then you can use the Terraform as well. Okay, so those are the few things where this Python and Terraform is useful. Okay, so during your course of time, what I can do is I can start up with Python basics and I can take up till where the knowledge is required for you to use APIs of cloud. Okay, so that is where till I will share the knowledge of Python, and then once you are good enough to you consume the APIs and run your automations across the cloud, then I can integrate Terraform also to you for creating the infrastructure and running some actions on that infrastructure. Okay, so this is what I will take care of during this course of time. Okay, so any questions on this part?
Hello, myself
Yes.
Prashali. I have to ask, like, when we talk about the migration technologies, right? So, how much? I mean, is that the only coding part you are going to cover, or because I have not seen any related topics to that? So, could you please give some insight on that?
Okay, so yeah, Mahesh.
Maybe I can start and you can add to it, Parmesh. With respect to database migration, so it's actually at the end of the course. So right after this, I was going to talk about that. There are three types of data migration we will be covering. One is the VM migration using AWS import export or another third-party tool. We'll be talking about database migration using the database migration service, which is an inbuilt service in Amazon. We're going to talk about data migration in specific. For example, if you're moving your unstructured data from, let's say, a file share or a NAS environment over to an S3 bucket.
Yeah.
These three will be covered as part of the course.
Okay, and this automation thing that we talk about, the Python and the Terraform. So, are we going from the basic or the scratch, or we are just covering the high level of overview?
No, from the basics I am going to cover those, but till what extent I will cover is where you can consume the cloud API. So a little bit of inheritance, but not entirely with networking, or there are some advanced topics in Python where we need not to use for this cloud automation. Okay, so I will be starting with very scratch of Python. Okay, and I will drive you till the extent where you can consume the APIs of cloud. Okay, so that is till where I can take. And Terraform is something like, if I explain for one resource, you can easily understand about the other resource. Okay, but the only thing you need to understand is how the secrets management will be. So what are the modules in Terraform are there? So I will explain you the modules. Okay, so you can easily understand for any other provider. Okay, so that is what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm actually working on the Terraform like since like 6 months back. I started.
Okay.
So it's easy to understand, but I just have to understand, like, as when we are considering about the migration. So are we only covering only those topics, or we are starting from the scratch, like on the Terraform?
No, we'll be starting from the scratch. I will explain you all the modules related to Terraform, and easily you can understand. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, queries from anyone?
Well, so what will be the course duration and the timings of the course? Shiva.
The overall duration part, hey Shiva, Mahi here. The overall duration part hasn't been firmly locked down. One of the coordinator will reach out to you with the timings and the number of hours. Like, because I have a certain number of hours for my course. I know Parmesh also does for his. We haven't really locked down it together, so we will get back to you on that.
Okay.
And how long duration will?
So that part, the coordinator will get back to you soon.
Okay.
Parameshwar, Deep here. As you said that you will be discussing this Terraform. Okay, I belong to storage background, so means I have some. I need to make some scripts for the storage. When it's existing storage, I need to run some health checks. So will that be helpful for me? Will that be an add-on for me? Means if I go through this course, will
Yes,
it be from
definitely.
scratch?
Yes. So as like I mentioned regarding the storage, right? So whenever you are going with, we face this problem when we spin up the NAS storage for our cloud instances. So we face the problem of this authentication. Okay, so that is my why I mentioned like we refer to many authentications and we prefer this continuous authentication. So you will understand how the storage is different from your on-premises or local to cloud. Okay, so how your entity, okay, NAS storage or SAN storage will work differently from how your local storage works. Okay, I mean legacy infrastructure. Fine. So definitely you will get the differences of what the cloud infrastructure is and how the on-premises is or legacy is. Okay.
And just to add to that, Habib, like I said, right, I've been a storage backup engineer architect myself. And when I started, looking at Terraform, right, I started off with Terraform with respect to VMware. I started doing a lot of automation, spinning up VMs, cloning VMs, post-install tasks. And I also started exploring Terraform with respect to storage vendors. There are a couple of storage vendors who support Terraform. Now, the Terraform, the reason it has become so popular and so powerful is even though you don't understand the scripting or programming language, you can still work through with Terraform because it's basically a set of JSON, structured files, which is JSON is basically a key value pair, right? You have a property, you have a value. That's it. So all you have to know is how to set up those property values and create something called as a Terraform file, which you run against a storage supported Terraform vendor or a VMware or a cloud. So once you get the flow of it, there is tons of documentation available in the Terraform site itself. And with knowledge from Paramesh, the add-on that you get with Python is instead of running the Terraform command manually, and then let's like you have one Terraform script to create a NetApp volume, let's say, and there is one more Terraform script to create a share out of it, and there is one more Terraform script to assign permissions to that share. Now, you can do all these 3 steps individually, but using the power of a programming language like Python, you can automate these 3 steps into one workflow. It's like whatever volume name comes out of Terraform one script, you input as a value to the second Terraform from where the share will be created, and then you input that share name to the third Terraform script, which will then add the permissions. That's the combination of Terraform and Python, which will give you the end-to-end workflow to be automated.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
All right, team. Anyone else? Please ask your questions. Shoot. We are
Mahi,
here to.
I have a I just have to ask. Will this course provide us with documentations? I mean,
Yes. From my side, absolutely. I have good documentation that I have written. I call it a AWS student guide or a run book. It will have a mix of my handwritten documents and a lot of references across different websites or blogs that will be helpful. Plus, as an add-on, I'm sure you're aware there's tons of documentation available in the AWS official site, some of which I might be referring to as we go through the course. So yes.
Okay. Yeah. And the lab sessions will also get covered, right?
Sorry, what was that?
I'm asking are we going? I mean, are we covering the lab stations as well? Like fully, it's a fully practical or theoretical? Like how it will be post-structured?
Absolutely. I mean, it's gonna be. I would say, more than 60-65% practical, because that's the advantage of cloud, right? Is I can show you everything because it's all there on all of us to use. So pretty much all the services we will be practicing as much as possible. Some of which, I would encourage you also to set up your own account with AWS if not already, and then do things for yourself. As in my explanation, there will be things that I'll be definitely showing in the console or through CLI. There might be a few homework kind of a things that I might request you to do it. But yes, we will be using practicals throughout.
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
So we'll be having a Git repository like this. Okay. So whatever the session has been covered, we will be putting that code for you on that particular day basis. Okay. And you can easily pull out the code once you are at home, and you can work on yeah, on that, on top of that code. If you want to contribute, you can contribute with a separate branch, and we will review that, as well as some assignments also be given to you. Okay, so you can pull out the assignments, you can work on the assignments, and again you can yeah, push it back. So that is how we will be organizing the day-to-day code lecture in using the Git repositories.
Yep. Okay, team, we are 1 hour 15 minutes past. Anything else that you guys want to ask or no? All right, perfect then. Yep. Someone add.
No, nothing. Clear, sir. Everything clear.
All right. Okay. Alrighty. Perfect, guys. Thank you so much. Then, unless Parmesh, you have any other last things to share?
No, I'm done, Mahesh.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. You have a great weekend, and the coordinators will reach out to you.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.